I used to think I'd seen every flavor of stupidity wearing a badge. I was wrong. The morning that proved it started with red and blue lights exploding in my rearview mirror. Only, they weren't police lights. It was dawn, that ghostly hour before the world remembers it's alive. Highway 17 was nearly empty, wind rolling down from the hills, pale fog hugging the shoulders. Then, there it was, a white SUV barreling up behind me, light bar flashing like a cheap disco, siren whining out of tune. The words on the door read in bold vinyl letters, Oak Haven Estates Community Compliance. That was my neighborhood. My overly landscaped, rule-choked slice of suburbia, where even mailbox paint had to be HOA approved. But this stretch of road wasn't anywhere near the gate. It was open highway, state-maintained. So what in the name of bureaucratic madness were they doing pulling me over out here? I eased my truck onto the gravel shoulder. Tires crackled. Dust whispered against the doors. I cut the engine and waited, my pulse steady, my patience ready but thin. The pretend cruiser stopped hard behind me. Its fake light bar warbled like a dying mosquito. Then I saw him, stepping out from behind that SUV like a ghost that hadn't learned it was dead. Kane. He'd gotten broader in the belly, thinner in morals. Tactical vest strapped over a polo shirt, Velcro pockets flapping empty like a Halloween costume trying far too hard. Once upon a time, he'd been a deputy, a bad one. Quick temper, slow paperwork. The kind of guy who sees every human being as an obstacle between him and significance. And once upon another time, I'd written the report that got him fired, the official record that described his creative evidence handling, and that little incident with a judge's wife. He'd left the force snarling, promising everyone someday he'd get even. Well, apparently, someday had arrived, complete with discount sirens and HOA decals. He swaggered to my window, a hand resting on the grip of a taser he'd probably bought online. His grin was all nicotine teeth and stale pride. "Sergeant James Francis," he drawled, voice pitched low for menace. "Fancy seeing you this far from the city." I cracked the window just enough to talk, not enough for him to breathe my air. That old habit, keep the glass between us, still worked. "Morning, Kane," I said, calm as still water. "This is a public road. Your HOA rules stop at the gate." "Private security has partnership authority now," he shot back fast, rehearsed, almost proud. "We keep our community safe." From the passenger side of the SUV, another man climbed out, young, nervous, dressed in an oversized polo that said, "Compliance Associate." He clutched a clipboard like it might ward off bullets. Kane jabbed a finger toward my front bumper. "See that? Your registration sticker's covered in mud. Violation of Oak Haven Bylaw 217, Section B." I followed his gesture. A sprinkle of dried mud from yesterday's fishing trip half-kissed the lower corner of my plate. But the sticker was perfectly readable from 10 feet away. I gave one small laugh. "You're kidding." "Not anymore," he said, smirking. "Thanks to our partnership with the county, compliance officers are authorized to enforce community standards on access roads. Councilman Dwyer himself saw the wisdom in that." "County memos don't rewrite state law," I replied. "You can't annex a highway." The kid licked his lips, reading shaky notes from his clipboard. Technically, sir, the resolution defines any road commonly used by residents as, a community thoroughfare extension. So per the agreement, we can issue citations and, if necessary, take, remedial action. Remedial action. Bless their hearts. That meant call Rizzo's tow service, the same greasy operation Kane used to moonlight with before he lost his badge. I gave them both a level stare. "You're not writing me a ticket, Kane." That broke his thin patience. His smile chilled. I'd seen that look before, right before the handcuffs and the lawsuit. "Oh, I'm not writing a ticket." He lifted his chin. "We're immobilizing your vehicle. Persistent violation. Eyesore. Doesn't meet community aesthetic standards." A gust of wind rattled the cheap plastic light bar behind him. It sounded as desperate as this whole performance. I kept my voice even. "Since we're trading legal opinions, cite me the statute." Kane blinked. The kid blinked harder, hunted through his clipboard pages like maybe one would produce law out of thin air. "Community Partnership Resolution?" I cut him off. "That's not statute. Try State Transportation Code, section on unauthorized immobilization. It's a misdemeanor." A tanker truck screamed by, horn blasting. The kid flinched so hard his pen fell. "Francis, don't make this difficult," Kane snapped. "I'm making it recorded," I said, tapping the small mic on my vest. "Names for the log," the kid mumbled. "No comment." "Good start," I muttered. "Spell that however you like. It'll read the same in court." Kane leaned in close, breath hot and sour. "Call your lawyer." I sipped my coffee instead. Already did. 5'7", answers to Anna, gets paid in fax. The kid's hands actually shook. For the first time, Kane's gaze flicked higher, toward the highway camera just down the pole line. A red lens stared back at him. He knew exactly what that meant. Objective record. Before I could voice another word, the kid ducked toward my front tire carrying something bright yellow. Too large, too heavy, and way too illegal. A vehicle boot, a boot. On a state highway. They were insane. Metal scraped, bolts clamped. A sound somewhere between comedy and felony. I sat there in silence, watching the theater. Kane leaned back into my window again, voice smug and low. Going to be hard to get to work now, Sergeant. Harder to pick up your boy from school. Cold hit me in the chest. He'd said my boy. He knew my schedule, my family. The calm I'd been wearing like armor started to crack at the seams. My hand, resting near my leg holster, stayed still, but every muscle from elbow to jaw locked tight. Show no anger. Show no fear. Win the game by letting them think they've already won. It's rule number 1. The final clunk of that boot's latch snapped the air like a gunshot. The kid stepped back fast, eyes down. Kane crossed his arms, triumph swelling his chest. So that's it? I asked, tone so mild it almost surprised me. You're just leaving my truck here in traffic with a boot on it? He shrugged. Rules are rules, Francis. You can call the number on the sticker and settle at the impound. Rizzo will handle the tow and the fees. Administrative, aesthetic, processing. He said fees like some people say sins forgiven. I smiled without showing teeth. Interesting business model. Fines grow into liens. Liens into quick sales. Kane said nothing, but the smirk twitched. I'd hit truth. The kid trudged up again, pressed a fluorescent sticker onto my driver's side window, right at eye level, covered in fine print and meaningless legalese. Across the top, in bold red, impound enforcement, do not move vehicle. The digital clock on my dash read 6:15 a.m., exactly when my normal shift at the PD used to start. Perfect timing. He stepped back like a magician unveiling his trick. The kid's hands trembled, and I wondered if he realized how deep a hole they were actually digging. I looked from the sticker to the boot to Kane. You know, the state code on highway right-of-way violations carries some real bite. Jail time, even. He laughed, whole body, confident. Oh, I'm terrified. You gonna arrest me, Sergeant? You're not even on duty. We're a sanctioned auxiliary service now, signed by Councilman Dwyer himself. Sure, I said. Maybe next week he'll authorize you to patrol Mars. Their faces stayed stone serious. They truly believed, or pretended to, that paperwork magic turned fantasy into law. For most people, intimidation would work. They'd pay the fine and slink away. But they picked the wrong driver this morning. Under the steering column, my left thumb double-tapped a recessed button on my radio belt. Silent signal to dispatch. Location pinged. Audio recording locked. Not an emergency alarm. Just the start of an official record. All right, Kane, I said finally, letting resignation creep into my voice. I slumped my shoulders, exhaled. You win. He hesitated, slightly unsure of the sudden surrender. Can I at least grab my coffee mug from the cab? I asked, weary, defeated in appearance only. His grin widened, false magnanimity dripping off every word. Be my guest, he said magnanimously. Rizzo should be here in about 20 minutes. Don't wander off. I opened my door slowly. I grabbed my mug from the console. I also grabbed my phone. I took a long, slow look at the boot. The sticker. The HOA SUV parked behind me with its lights still flashing and Kane standing there like a king on a throne of gravel. My phone was in my hand, but it looked like I was just shielding my eyes from their obnoxious lights. I took 3 quick, clear photos. The boot with my license plate visible, the sticker on the window, and a wide shot showing my truck, their vehicle, and the highway marker in the background. Evidence undeniable, time-stamped, and geo-tagged. I shut the door and walked around the front of my truck. You have a good day now, Kane, I said, giving him a little nod. I started walking down the shoulder of the highway back toward the entrance of Oak Haven Estates. It was about a meal. He watched me go, probably thinking I was a beaten man heading home to call a cab. He didn't know I was on the phone with the one person who could turn this entire situation on its head. Hey, Anna, I said, my voice low. Yeah, it's me. Change of plans for the morning. I need a ride, and I need you to do a little digging for me. Start with Councilman Dwyer and a tow company. Run by a guy named Rizzo. We've got a problem. In my ear, I could hear her typing before I even finished my sentence. Anna was a research analyst, and she could find a needle in a digital haystack in under 5 minutes. The game was on. Kane and his boss, Karen Duke, thought they were playing checkers. They were about to find out I play chess, and my queen was already on the move. The walk home was long enough for the anger to cool and the cold, hard reality to sit in. My truck, my property was being held hostage on a public road by a private company with a vendetta. This wasn't just a fine, it was extortion with extra steps. When I got back to the house, Anna was already at the kitchen table, her laptop open, a storm of concentration on her face. She had that look she gets when she's deep into a problem. A slight furrow in her brow, her focus so intense the rest of the world just fades away. She looked up as I came in, her expression a mix of concern and simmering fury. "They booted the truck on the highway?" she asked, her voice tight. I nodded, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge, led by our old friend Kane. "Apparently they're a sanctioned auxiliary service now. Sanctioned by who?" "A councilman with a $10 haircut and the ethics of a rattlesnake," she muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm already finding things. Dwyer sponsored a community partnership ordinance 3 months ago. It's vague, full of language about streamlining local enforcement and empowering private-public cooperation. It's a blank check, James." We spent the next few hours digging, and I got Leo off to school in Anna's car. The day felt off. I was grounded, a pilot without a plane. By the time evening rolled around, we had a clearer picture. Karen Duke, the HOA president, sat on the board of a property management company that held Dwyer's business loans. Rizzo's Towing had an exclusive no-bid contract with Oakhaven Estates. Every booted car, every towed vehicle was a direct deposit into their pockets. It was a neat, tidy, and thoroughly illegal little ecosystem of greed. That night the harassment started. It wasn't subtle. Around 1000 p.m., a blinding white light shot through our living room window. I went to the door and looked out. Parked across the street just outside our property line was the same white community compliance SUV. One of their guys was standing beside it, holding a massive million-candle power spotlight aimed directly at our house. It was petty, it was childish, and it was designed to provoke. I could feel the old instincts kicking in. Go out there, confront them, assert my rights, flash my badge. But I knew that's what they wanted. They wanted me to lose my temper, to do something they could use against me. Karen Duke was polished and smart. She wouldn't leave things to a hothead like Kane without a plan. "Don't," Anna said, her hand on my arm. "Don't give them the satisfaction." She was right. We closed the blinds, but the light still bled through the cracks. A constant silent accusation. An hour later, a new sound joined the party, a high-pitched buzzing whine. I looked out the back window, a drone. It was hovering just over our fence line, its little red and green lights blinking in the dark. It dipped and swayed, pointing its camera lens right at our back porch, our kitchen window. It was an invasion. Light trespass and peeping with a drone. Both are crimes when aimed into a home. A complete and utter violation of our privacy. Our home was supposed to be our sanctuary, the one place the ugliness of the world couldn't touch us. And now, thanks to Karen Duke, it felt like we were living in a fishbowl. "That's it," I said, my voice low. "They're filming my house." I could feel the anger bubbling up again, hot and thick. This was too far. What gives them the right? Who do these people think they are? The question of what makes someone feel untouchable echoed in my head. Was it a piece of paper from a crooked councilman? A cheap uniform? Or just the simple, arrogant belief that the rules don't apply to them? Just as I was about to grab my phone and call the actual police, I heard a shuffling sound from next door. Our neighbor, Finley, a retired accountant with a passion for gardening and a healthy distrust of authority, peered over the fence. He was a good man, quiet, but you could see the steel in his eyes. "Evening, James," he said, his voice a theatrical whisper. "Looks like you've attracted some paparazzi." His attempt at humor was a welcome relief. "Something like that, Finley?" I replied. "You getting the light show too?" He gestured with his thumb toward the front of his house. "Oh yeah. It's like living next to a movie premiere, only the stars are a couple of goons in a Ford Explorer, and now we have a peeping tombot. Classy." The drone buzzed angrily as if it had heard him. It swiveled its camera toward him. Finley, without missing a beat, raised his garden hose, which was already in his hand. "You think this thing is waterproof?" he asked me, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I wouldn't," I said, though a part of me desperately wanted him to. "They're looking for a reaction." "Any reaction?" He sighed, lowering the hose. "You're right, but it's tempting." The three Ophis, me, Anna, and Finley, stood there in the quiet dark, a spotlight on one side, a drone on the other. We were prisoners in our own homes. It was absurd. It was infuriating. And it was a turning point. This wasn't just about a boot on my truck anymore. It wasn't about a single instance of harassment. This was a systematic campaign of intimidation. Karen Duke and her cronies weren't just trying to make a profit. They were trying to own us, to control every aspect of our lives within their little kingdom. Standing there bathed in the unwelcome glow of their spotlight, I made a decision. I wasn't going to play their game of provocation and reaction anymore. I was going to change the game entirely. I was going to take it apart piece by piece from the inside out. They wanted to watch me fine. I was about to give them a show they'd never forget. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in quiet, disciplined fury. Anna and I operated like a well-oiled machine. While she continued her deep dive into the digital paper trail connecting Duke, Dwyer, and Rizzo, I focused on the physical world. Their power came from the tow yard. That was their bank, their dungeon, the place where they turned intimidation into cash. I needed to see it, not as a cop, but as a potential victim. I needed to understand the scale of their operation. We came up with a plan. It was risky but necessary. I dug out some old clothes, grease-stained jeans, a faded t-shirt with a rip in the collar, a battered baseball cap I could pull down low. I left my badge, my weapon, and my wallet at home. I took $50 in cash and a burner phone Anna had set up. I became someone else. Someone down on his luck, looking for a cheap part to fix a dying car. Rizzo's towing and impound was exactly what you'd expect. It was a graveyard of bad decisions and worse luck. Tucked away in an industrial corner of the county, a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire surrounded several acres of dirt and gravel. Cars were crammed in fender to fender in various states of decay. Some looked like they had been in accidents, but many, I noted, looked perfectly fine. A minivan with a faded soccer mom sticker, a contractor's pickup truck, tools still visible in the bed, a late-model sedan that wouldn't have looked out of place in our neighborhood. These were the cash cows, the vehicles towed for petty made-up violations. I walked into the office, a small, grimy trailer that smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. A large man with a stained shirt and a permanent scowl sat behind a metal desk. This had to be Rizzo. He looked like he was carved out of cheap lard. "What do you want?" he grunted, not even looking up from his crossword puzzle. "Looking for a side mirror," I said, putting a little gravel in my voice. "For an '08 Civic. Heard you guys sometimes sell parts." He finally looked up, his eyes small and suspicious. He sized me up, and whatever he saw, he must have decided I wasn't a threat. "We ain't a junkyard," he snapped. "Everything in that lot is pending resolution." A beautiful bureaucratic phrase. It meant the owners were being bled dry by storage fees until they either paid up or the holding period expired, at which point Rizzo could file for a lien and take ownership. Yeah, I get it," I said, playing the part. "Just my buddy. He said his car got towed here last week. Said you had a whole row of them. Thought maybe, you could look the other way. $50. I slid the cash across the counter. Rizzo's eyes flickered to the money, then back to my face. A greedy little smile touched the corners of his mouth. "The yard is closed to the public," he said. But his tone had softened. He was considering it. This was my chance. My eyes scanned the office, and there it was. On a corkboard behind his head, hanging next to a greasy calendar, was a clipboard. It had a handwritten title at the top. Oakhaven Active Tows. It was a log, a list of every car they had snatched from my neighborhood. I could see dates, license plates, and violation codes. "Look," I said, leaning in conspiratorially. "I'm in a real jam. Just let me take a quick look myself. I won't touch nothing. I'll be in and out in 5 minutes. What's the harm?" He eyed the 50 again, then slowly pocketed it. "Fine," he grunted. 5 minutes, and if I see you with so much as a screwdriver in your hand, I'm calling the sheriff." He buzzed the gate lock, and I walked out into the yard. The sheer number of cars was staggering. I started walking the rows, my burner phone in my hand, held casually at my side. I wasn't just looking for a mirror. I was documenting. I used a specific app Anna had installed. Every photo I took was instantly and silently uploaded to a secure cloud server. It wasn't traceable back to the phone. It took pictures of license plates, of the chalk marks on the tires, of the toe slips tucked under windshield wipers. I saw cars belonging to at least a dozen of my neighbors. The Miller's SUV, the Garcia's work van, old Mr. Henderson's pristine classic car, which he only drove on Sundays. They were gutting our community one vehicle at a time. I made my way back toward the office, finding disappointment. As I passed the office window, Rizzo had his back to me, yelling at someone on the phone. The clipboard, the Oakhaven log, was right there. It was now or never. With my heart pounding, I raised the phone, aimed it through the dirty glass, and zoomed in. The angle was bad. The light was poor, but I snapped 3 quick photos. It might be blurry, but it would be enough. The names, the dates, the sheer volume of it. It was proof of a coordinated predatory operation. Anna also filed public records requests last week. Dwyer's office dumped emails this morning. Gold. I walked back into the office. "No luck," I said, shaking my head. "Thanks anyway." Rizzo just grunted, not even looking at me. He was already back to his crossword puzzle. The $50 was gone. I walked out of that gate feeling like I had just robbed a bank. In a way, I had. I had stolen their most valuable asset, their secrecy, As I drove away in Anna's car, which I had parked a few blocks down, I knew we had crossed a new threshold. We had hard evidence. We had a list of victims. But I also had a chilling thought. If they were willing to go this far for money, what would they do to protect their golden goose? The answer, I suspected, was anything. And I was now officially their biggest threat. The evidence was burning a hole in our secure cloud server. We had the photos from the tow yard, the blurry but legible shot of the tow log, and Anna had unearthed the corporate filings linking everyone together. It was a solid case, but it was circumstantial. We had the what, but we needed the how. We needed to show intent. We needed to catch them in the act of breaking a real law, not just a series of morally bankrupt but legally gray HOA bylaws. I knew they would escalate. Their type always does. When bullies don't get their way with intimidation, they resort to dirtier tricks. I just had to be ready to catch them when they did. I started with my truck. After 3 days of calls and stonewalling, I finally paid the exorbitant fines to get it released from Rizzo's gulag. It cost me nearly $900. I paid in cash and got a receipt, another piece of the puzzle. But I didn't just drive it home. I drove it straight to a buddy of mine who runs a high-end car security shop. I want a camera, I told him, but I don't want to see it. I want it to see everything, front and back, and record to a separate hidden drive. And I want it wired directly to the battery, so it's on 24/7 whether the truck's running or not. He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. He knew my line of work. An hour and a few hundred later, the F-150 was equipped with a surveillance system that would make a spy jealous. I parked it in my driveway right where I always did, in plain sight. It was bait. I felt a little guilty using my beloved rusty truck like a piece of cheese in a mousetrap. But it was necessary. We just had to wait. We didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later it happened. The droney in the spotlight had become a nightly ritual, a tedious form of psychological warfare. We'd started ignoring them, drawing the heavy blackout curtains Anna had bought. But around 2 a.m., our dog, a lazy old golden retriever named Buster, started a low growl. He never growls. I got out of bed and crept to the window, peering through a tiny gap in the curtains. The spotlight was off. The street was dark and quiet. Too quiet. Then I saw him, a figure dressed in black moving silently up my driveway. He was trying to stay in the shadows cast by the big oak tree in my front yard. But as he got closer to the truck, he passed through a patch of moonlight. It was Kane. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of excitement and dread. This was it. I watched as he expertly jimmied the lock on my passenger side door. The old Ford wasn't exactly Fort Knox. He was inside in less than 10 seconds. He kept low below the window line, but I could see the faint glow of a small flashlight as he moved around inside the cab. What was he doing? Wires, a GPS tracker, worse. I didn't move, I just watched. My phone was in my hand, recording him through the window, a shaky but clear backup to the main event. After about a minute, he slid back out, closing the door so gently it barely made a sound. He gave a quick look around, then melted back into the shadows. He was gone. I waited a full 5 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs before I went outside. The air was cold. I walked over to the truck, my own flashlight in hand. Everything looked normal. I opened the passenger door and did a slow, methodical sweep. At first I saw nothing. He was good, I'll give him that. But I was better. Tucked deep under the passenger seat, pushed way into the back corner, was a small, clear plastic baggie. Inside was a white crystalline substance. It was meant to look like a distributable amount of a-controlled substance. It was a plant. A frame job. Classic, desperate, and utterly stupid. They were trying to get me arrested, to discredit me, to get me fired. They wanted to take my badge, the own thing that gave me the authority to fight back. Then I went back inside, woke up Anna, and we pulled up the footage from the hidden cameras. And there it was. Crystal clear, high-defin video. The camera mounted near the rear view mirror had a perfect shot of Kane's face. As he leaned in, you could see him pull the baggie from his pocket. You could see him shove it under the seat. The rear-facing camera caught his approach and his retreat. It was undeniable. It was beautiful. It was Aflany caught on tape. I didn't touch the bag. We left it in place for a warrant pickup. "Oh, you magnificent rusty beast," Anna whispered, looking at the footage on my laptop. She was talking to the truck. I couldn't have agreed more. We finally had them. This wasn't about a bylaw or a towing fee anymore. This was conspiracy to introduce contraband, breaking and entering and attempting to frame a law enforcement officer. These were hard charges, the kind that came with prison sentences. Karen Duke, in her petty, profit-driven arrogance, had finally overplayed her hand. She had sent her goon to plant a bomb, not realizing my entire house was already wired for sound. The question was, what was the next move? Do I take this to my boss, the sheriff? Or was the rot in the county deeper than just one councilman? This evidence was a weapon. I had to make sure I aimed it at the right target at the right time to take the whole rotten structure down at once. The next morning, I walked into the Picton County Sheriff's Department with a copy of the video on a thumb drive. I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. This was the final piece. The evidence was ironclad, but who could I trust to see it through? The sheriff was a good man, but he was old school, set in his ways, and had a known blind spot for anything involving local politics. He hated rocking the boat. Going to him directly might get the whole thing buried in paperwork. So I chose someone else. Deputy Morales, young, smart, hungry. I'd been his field training officer a few years back. I knew he was a straight arrow. I found him at his desk finishing up some reports. I kept my voice low. Morales, you need a minute. Private. We went to a small interview room. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and institutional soap. I laid it all out for him. The stop, the boot, the harassment, the tow yard, the financial connections Anna had uncovered, and then the grand finale. I slid the thumb drive across the table. This is from a hidden cam in my truck. Footage from last night. He plugged it into his laptop. I watched his face as he saw Kane break into my truck. His eyes widened. When the video showed the baggie being planted under the seat, he let out a low whistle. He looked up at me, his expression serious. Sergeant, this is big. This is a felony. More than one. I know, I said. That's why I brought it to you. We need to handle this by the book, but we need to handle it smart. Dwyer's name is all over this. We can't risk him getting a heads up and burying it. Morales nodded, his mind clearly working. He ejected the drive and handed it back to me. He tapped the desk twice. Our old FTO sit-tight code, then went cold. I played along. Okay, he said, his voice now formal, official. I've seen the evidence you presented. However, Sergeant, this is a complex jurisdictional matter. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. That was not the response I was expecting. Jurisdictional? Morales? It's a felony. It happened in the county. That's our jurisdiction. He avoided my eyes, looking down at his desk. The initial incident involves an HOA, which is a civil matter. And Councilman Dwyer's office has expressed an interest in ensuring these new community partnerships operate smoothly. We've been instructed to defer to the Oakhaven Compliance Division on internal matters. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Internal matters? He planted drugs in my truck. Marco, this isn't an internal matter. It's a crime. I was trying to keep my voice down, but the frustration was boiling over. He stood up, his face a mask of bureaucratic indifference. I understand your frustration, Sergeant Francis, but my hands are tied. The official channel for this complaint would be to file a report with the Oakhaven Estates Grievance Committee. As for the video, without a proper chain of custody and a warrant for the surveillance, it could be seen as inadmissible. He was stonewalling me. He was feeding me lines, quoting policy he knew was nonsense. The kid I had trained, the one I thought was a straight shooter, was folding. Or worse, he was already in their pocket. My mind reeled. Had they gotten to him? Was the rot that deep? Did everyone have a price? The question of who is truly untouchable slammed back into my thoughts. Maybe Karen Duke was right. Maybe with enough money and the right politician, you could buy your own set of laws. I stood up, a feeling of profound disappointment washing over me. I felt alone. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt like I was truly on my own. Anna was with me. Finley was a good neighbor, but in the world of badges and laws, I was an island. I see, I said, my voice cold. I took the thumb drive from the table. Thanks for your time, Deputy. I turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. As I passed his desk, he was already on the phone, his voice low. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could guess. He was probably calling Kane or Duke, telling them I knew, telling them what evidence I had. I walked out of the station and into the bright sunlight, feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. The betrayal hurt more than the harassment. It meant the system I had dedicated my life to was just as corrupt as the people I was trying to stop. I got in my truck, the same truck that held the proof of their crimes, and just sat there for a long moment. The game had changed again. I couldn't count on the law to help me because the law, at least in Picton County, was for sale. If I was going to win this, I would have to do it myself. And I'd have to be prepared for the fact that the next time I saw a uniform, they might not be on my side. They might be coming to arrest me on a bogus charge with Kane and Karen Duke smiling right behind them. The trap was closing, and my escape routes were vanishing one by one. The fake betrayal by Morales was a bitter pill to swallow, but it had one unintended consequence. It made me more determined. If the system wouldn't help, I'd have to force its hand. That evening, an email went out to all Oakhaven Estates residents. It was from Karen Duke. The subject line read, Mandatory Community Compliance Sweep. It announced that in 2 days, her compliance division, along with Rizzo's towing, would be conducting a full sweep of the neighborhood. Any vehicle with an expired registration, a flat tire, visible rust, or any other aesthetic violation of the HOA's ridiculously long list of rules would be immediately towed. No warnings, no second chances. It was a declaration of open warfare. It was a cash grab, pure and simple, designed to punish the entire neighborhood for my defiance. She was going to make an example of all of us. But as I read the email, a text came through on my phone. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Sweep at 8 a.m. single entry. Oak Street. Other gates chained for safety. Surprise planned. Be ready. I knew instantly who it was from. Morales. He hadn't betrayed me. He had been playing a part. He couldn't act officially. Not with Dwyer looking over his shoulder, so he was helping me unofficially. The game was still on. The sense of relief was quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. A single point of entry. A surprise. I knew exactly what that meant. They were going to try and trap us. The morning of the sweep, the air was thick with tension. You could feel it. Neighbors who usually just gave a polite nod were stopping to talk to each other in low, worried tones. They were scared. They were being bullied, and they didn't know how to fight back. Anna and I were ready. She was manning our comm center at the kitchen table, a network of laptops and phones, connecting her with a handful of other feed-up residents who had agreed to be our eyes and ears. I was in my truck. At 7:55 a.m., I drove toward the Oak Street gate, the only way in or out of our sprawling subdivision. Just as the text had predicted, they were setting up a roadblock. Kane's white SUV was parked sideways, blocking one lane. Kane himself was standing there looking smug, directing a couple of his goons as they unloaded something from the back of their vehicle. It was a spike strip, a long articulated bar of hollow spikes designed to shred tires instantly. They were planning on laying it across the road to stop anyone who tried to run their illegal blockade. It was a dangerous, reckless, and highly illegal tactic, usually reserved for high-speed police pursuits. Using it on suburbanites in a private neighborhood was insane. I stopped my truck 100 yards back, watching them. This was their surprise. They wanted to create a bottleneck to check every car to tow as many as possible. The spike strip was their insurance policy against anyone who objected. I looked at the tool in the passenger seat next to me. It was a long, sturdy pole with a U-shaped hook on the end, the kind used by utility workers to lift manhole covers. I'd borrowed it from my own garage. My plan was simple and very, very risky. I waited. The tow trucks from Rizzo's fleet started to arrive, lining up behind Kane's SUV like vultures waiting for a meal. There were 4 of them. This was going to be a massacre. At exactly 8 a.m., Kane gave the signal. His 2 goons started to unfold the spike strip, preparing to drag it across the open lane. That was my cue. I put the truck in gear and hit the gas. I wasn't flying, not yet. Just a steady, deliberate acceleration. Kane saw me coming. A look of confusion, then anger crossed his face. He probably thought I was going to try and run the roadblock. He started yelling at his men, waving his arms. Get it down. Get it down now. They scrambled, dragging the spike strip into position. I was closing the distance fast. 50 yards, 40, 30. Kane was standing right in the middle of the road, a hand on his taser, a foolishly brave look on his face. He thought he could intimidate me into stopping. He didn't know me very well. At 20 yards, I swerved slightly, aiming not for Kane but for the very edge of the spike strip. As I came alongside it, I slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched, fishtailing slightly as I brought it to a halt just inches from the strip. For a second, everything was frozen. Kane, his mouth open, his goons staring. Then I moved. I already had the passenger door open. I leaned out, the long pole in my hands. I hooked the end of the spike strip, and with all my strength, I pulled. The strip was designed to be heavy, but not that heavy. The end lifted off the ground. At the same time, I yelled, "Now Finley!" My neighbor, who had been hiding in the bushes near the gate, turned on the high-powered leaf blower we had synchronized. It wasn't about the wind. It was about the noise. The sudden deafening roar startled Kane's men. In that split second of confusion, I gave the pole one final mighty heave. The spike strip flipped over. A beautiful metallic somersault in the morning sun. It flipped part way. One edge still spiked. The flatbed clipped the raised edge, dragged the strip forward, snapping the spikes back up under its own weight. Hiss. Both front tires went soft at once. Then the truck plowed sideways into Kane's SUV. The chain reaction was immediate. The second tow truck, following too closely, couldn't stop in time, and rear-ended the first. The chaos was total. Kane's perfect intimidating roadblock had in the space of 5 seconds turned into a 3-vehicle pileup of his own making. He stood there amidst the wreckage and hissing tires, his face a perfect mask of utter disbelief. The trap had been sprung, but the wrong animal was in it. The scene at the gate was pure chaos. Kane stood frozen for a moment. his beautiful, intimidating blockade now a heap of twisted metal and shredded rubber. His authority had evaporated in a cloud of radiator fluid. Residents started coming out of their houses, drawn by the noise. They saw the wrecked trucks, the flipped spike strip, and me standing by my F-150 with a long metal pole in my hand. Then Kane's shock turned to rage. His face went purple. He needed a target, someone to blame for his own spectacular failure. His eyes scanned the growing crowd of onlookers and landed on the nearest, least threatening person he could find. Neighbor Finley. Finley, bless his heart, had emerged from the bushes, holding his leaf blower like a trophy. He had a huge, triumphant grin on his face. He looked like a gardener who had just won the lottery. "Well?" Finley said to no one in particular, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "That didn't go as planned, did it?" "That was all it took." Kane snapped. He strode over to Finley, his whole body radiating menace. He got right in Finley's face, puffing out his chest. "You think you're clever, old man?" Kane snarled, jabbing a thick finger into Finley's chest. "You're obstructing a sanctioned community action. That's a serious violation." Finley, who was a good foot shorter and about 50 lb lighter than Kane, didn't flinch. "I was just doing some yard work," he said calmly. "It's a free country, or it used to be." That calm defiance was like gasoline on a fire. Kane shoved him hard. It wasn't a little push. It was a violent, two-handed shove to the chest. Finley, a man in his late 60s, stumbled backward, his feet tangling. He fell hard on the pavement, the leaf blower clattering beside him. A collective gasp went through the crowd. That was the line. You can mess with people's cars. You can harass them with lights and drones, but you don't put your hands on them. You don't assault an elderly man in front of his friends and neighbors. Before I even consciously decided to move, I was moving. 3 long strides and I was between them. I didn't say a word. I just stood there planting myself in front of Finley, who was trying to sit up, a dazed look on his face. "Get out of my way, Francis," Kane growled, his fists clenched. "This doesn't concern you." "You just assaulted my neighbor," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It concerns me." Hellowed a short, ugly bark. Assault. I barely touched him. He tripped. "Now move before I have you arrested for interference." He took a step forward, trying to use his size to intimidate me, to bull his way past me. He reached out to shove me aside, just like he had shoved Finley. It was a mistake. I'd spent 20 years on the job. I'd dealt with angry drunks, violent criminals, and people twice Kane's size. His move was sloppy, broadcast a mile away. As his hand came toward my chest, I moved with him, not against him. I deflected his arm, using his own momentum to spin him slightly off balance. In the same fluid motion, my right hand came up. It wasn't a wild haymaker. It was a short, clean, perfectly placed punch. A straight right aimed directly at his jaw. My knuckles connected with a satisfying solid thud. Glove leather bone done. No follow-up. I wanted compliance, not damage. Quickly, decisively. Kane's eyes went wide with surprise, then glazed over. His knees buckled. He went down like a sack of wet cement, landing in a heap right next to the spike strip he'd been so proud of. He was out cold. The entire fight, from his shove to my punch, had lasted less than 3 seconds. It was over before it began. There was a moment of stunned silence. The residents stared, their mouths open. They had just watched the neighborhood bully, the big bad enforcer, get knocked out with a single clean shot. Then someone started clapping. It was Finley, who was now back on his feet, dusting himself off. Then another person joined in and another. Soon the whole crowd was applauding. I didn't acknowledge them. Ick knelt beside Kane, checking his pulse. It was strong. He'd have a sore jaw and a massive headache, but he was fine. I looked up at the crowd. I saw fear turning into something else. Hope. They'd been pushed, and they had just seen someone push back and win. They saw that the bully wasn't 10 F tall. He was just a man, and he was currently sleeping on the asphalt. Is stood up as Anna came running over, a first aid kit in her hand. She glanced at Kane, then at me. "Is he?" "He's fine," I said. "He'll wake up with a new appreciation for respecting his elders." The balance of power in Oak Haven Estates had just shifted dramatically. It wasn't about trucks or bylaws anymore. It was about people. And my neighbors were finally realizing they didn't have to be victims. They just needed someone to throw the first punch. With Kane unconscious on the pavement and his grand compliance sweep in literal ruins, Karen Duke's carefully constructed empire began to crumble. She made a fatal mistake. Panicked and furious, she called an emergency HOA meeting for that very evening in the community clubhouse. The email she sent was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive rage, condemning the violent and coordinated assault on her compliance officers and promising to hold the responsible parties accountable. She was going to use the public forum to shame me, to isolate me, to turn the neighborhood against me. She thought she was walking into a room of frightened sheep she could easily herd. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. Anna and I spent the afternoon preparing. While I gave a full detailed statement to a very interested state trooper about the spike strip incident and the assault on Finley, Anna was coordinating our counterattack. She had a small, powerful projector and her laptop. Our neighbor Finley, now a local hero, helped us set it up discreetly in the back of the clubhouse an hour before the meeting, hiding it behind a potted plant. We ran a long extension cord and connected the projector to Anna's laptop, which she would control remotely from her phone. The stage was set. When we walked into the clubhouse that evening, the room was packed. The energy was electric, a mix of fear, anger, and curiosity. Karen Duke was at the front of the room standing at a lectern. She was flanked by Councilman Dwyer, who looked deeply uncomfortable, and a very bruised, very sullen-looking Kane. A large white projection screen was pulled down behind them, ready for Karen's triumphant presentation. She began her speech, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. She talked about safety, about rules, about the unfortunate but necessary actions her team had been forced to take. She was painting a picture of a community under siege from a rogue element, namely me. "We will not be intimidated by thugs," she said, glaring in my direction. "We will not allow one person's refusal to comply with our shared community standards to endanger us all." As she spoke, Anna, sitting calmly in the back row, tapped a button on her phone. The projector behind the plant hummed to life. An image flashed onto the big screen behind Karen Duke. It wasn't her presentation. It was a crystal-clear screenshot of an email from Karen Duke to Councilman Dwyer pulled from the county's public records release this morning. Subject: Oak Haven Ordinance. The email read, "Frank, the language needs to be vague. We need discretionary enforcement. Give my team the teeth they need, and I'll make sure that little business loan issue of yours disappears." We all eat. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Dwyer went pale, looking at the screen like he'd seen a ghost. Karen faltered, her words catching in her throat. Before she could recover, Anna swiped her phone again. A new image appeared. It was the blurry photo I took of the toll log from Rizzo's office. Anna had cleaned it up, highlighting the names of people sitting right there in the room. The Garkas, the Millers, Mr. Henderson, the date, the bogus violation, the exorbitant fee. A new, angrier sound rumbled through the crowd. "They said my van was a commercial vehicle," Mr. Garcia shouted. "I'm a carpenter. Those are my tools." Karen banged the lectern with her gavel. "This is an unauthorized presentation. This is slander." But it was too late. She had lost the room. Then came the grand finale. Anna hit the play button. The screen filled with the grainy night visions footage from my truck's hidden camera. The room went dead silent. They watched as Kane, their head of compliance, jimmied the lock on my truck. They saw him sneak inside. They saw him pull the baggie of white powder from his pocket and shove it under my seat. A collective gasp filled the room. It was undeniable. It was monstrous. This wasn't about rules. It was a criminal conspiracy. As the video played, I stood up. I unclipped the small body camera from my uniform shirt, a camera that had been recording since I walked into the room. "For the record," I said, my voice calm and clear, ringing through the silent room. "This entire meeting, including the evidence being presented, is being live-streamed directly to a task force at the State Attorney General's office. They've been staged 2 blocks out since noon, waiting on probable cause." I turned the camera slowly, panning across the shocked faces of my neighbors, then lingering on the pure, unadulterated panic on the faces of Karen Duke, Councilman Dwyer, and Kane. Dwyer looked like he was about to be physically ill. Kane was trying to shrink into his chair. Karen just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, her polished facade completely shattered. And then we heard it, a sound that to Mace one of the most beautiful in the world. The distant approaching wail of sirens, not one but many. They grew louder and louder, a chorus of justice coming for them. The doors to the clubhouse burst open. Another team served the warrant at my house. The bag's already sealed and logged, but it wasn't a single deputy. It was Deputy Morales, flanked by a half-dozen state troopers and county detectives. "Karen Duke," Morales said, his voice ringing with authority. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and extortion." 2 troopers stepped forward, pulling her hands behind her back. The cuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed in the silent room. One by one, they were led away. Dwyer sputtering about his rights. Rizzo, who they picked up at his office, and Kane, who didn't even put up a fight. He just looked defeated. The untouchables were being touched, and it was happening in front of everyone they had terrorized. The aftermath was fast and loud with this video, the email trail, and a stack of neighbor statements. The state attorney general took the case and tagged it organized crime, not HOA overreach. News vans swarmed Picton County. Oak Haven's lean for-profit pipeline made the nightly shows. Turned out we were their pilot. They were gearing up to copy-paste the scam across the county. We didn't just save our block. We pulled the plug on a rollout. Court moved slower, but the ending never felt in doubt. Karen Duke took a plea. 5 years forfeit of her slush, barred from any HOA role again. Councilman Dwyer resigned and caught corruption charges. Rizzo lost his license, his yard, and his freedom. Kane, caught planting dope in my truck on HD video, drew the longest bid. Oak Haven's community compliance was dissolved by court order. Dwyer's pet ordinance was repealed. A-class action, Finley's lead, cleaned out the leftovers. Every family hit with bogus fines or TOWs got restitution plus damages. It didn't erase the months of stress, but it paid back what they stole and then some. The neighborhood exhaled. Spotlights stopped. The drone went quiet. Garage doors stayed open again. Kids chalked dragons on the street. Beige gave way to color. Finley tore out his hedges and planted a riot of flowers. Pure, joyful defiance. No one cited him. In fact, half the neighborhood copied him. Karen's president parking plaque was auctioned for charity. Finley bought it for $5 and turned it into a bird bath. We had our home back. At my house, normal felt new. Leo rode his bike without a clipboard shadow. Anna shut the laptop at sunset and just held my hand on the porch. Quiet wasn't a trap anymore. It felt like ours. I learned something important. I've always believed in the system, but a system is only as honest as the people inside it. Give bad actors a little darkness and they write their own rules. The real word for untouchable is secret. That's what powered Karen's kingdom. Confusion. Favors and the hope that no one would look too closely. We looked, we lit it up, and once the lights came on, emails on a screen, body cam live, spike strip hissing, her power shrank to its true size, a bully's bluff. My name is James Francis. I'm Highway Patrol. I'm also a husband, a dad, and a neighbor. I don't go looking for fights, but if you bring one to my street, I'll end it clean. Justice isn't always neat or quiet. Sometimes it sounds like tires going flat and handcuffs closing. Sometimes it's a projector full of truth.